Welcome to Class 3 of Nonprofit Marketing. It's good to be back with you again. And I've actually recorded this particular lecture a number of times and had some problems with it, so it's good to finally be with you. Let me pray and we'll begin with our course content for tonight. Gracious Heavenly Father, I just thank you so much for these students. I pray that they'd persevere just as I've persevered in creating this lecture. I pray, Lord, that you will minister to their needs and that you will help me to communicate important information about nonprofit marketing to them. Lord, help us to see how to use this in our different ministries, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, we're going to talk about volunteers and donors tonight. Marketing to volunteers and donors. And let me begin by saying that nonprofit managers use direct marketing for fundraising, for membership recruitment, for product sales, for all of these things. And one of the reasons I'm covering this particular topic is because it's so important to carry along some of the same thinking we've been talking about into the activities to market to donors and volunteers. Let's face it, donors and volunteers are crucial to the success of a nonprofit organization. And so because they're so crucial, marketing to them is vital. Now, as we talk about direct marketing, we're referring to marketing messages that we use to send to specific individuals and seek a response. Now that response might be a donation, completing a survey, some other action. And examples of how this communication is done may be telemarketing, that is phoning the individuals, maybe texting the individuals, direct mail, snail mail we call it, sending first class or bulk postage type solicitations or announcements. And then the internet has all sorts of direct marketing opportunities, including email messages. And most of you have more than one email address, and most people do these days, even though email is a less effective way. But in modern times, we know that we can, the term is geofence, our donors or our donor group by using cookies or by using other ways of identifying our target audience and making solicitations to them. So we're going to talk about that a little bit, but I just want you to understand what we mean about direct marketing. It's about sending a message because we're expecting some sort of a response. Now let me validate a little bit why I need to talk about this particular subject. According to the American Association of Fundraising Council, the United States contributed about $200 billion to nonprofit organizations each year. However, more than $100 billion of that is a result of direct marketing solicitation. Donors can differ markedly in the amount they contribute, but the truth is it's those small monthly donors that make up the greater percentage of all of that, and they're responding to direct solicitation, to direct marketing. Now, nonprofit managers may use the direct marketing for a lot of different purposes. Direct marketing may be used to help to create or solidify their reputation, for example. And direct marketing properly used can help build relationships with supporters. And it can also help the organization grow and communicate the organization's programs, their values, attract operating funds. It can be a useful tool to help identifying supporters willing and able to donate large sums of money, make bequests in their estate plans, or perhaps even volunteer at the organization. Unfortunately, some nonprofit managers have unrealistic expectations for direct marketing and they don't plan or implement campaigns effectively enough. So we're going to talk about them during this lecture. I know that some of these things might seem kind of scary to some of you, and you might be asking yourself, well, how's it going to be effective in my faith-based nonprofit organization, or can I even use this information in my church? And the answer to those questions is yes. Another study by the Direct Marketing Association, and the slide shows you their website, so you can go and investigate this more on your own if you'd like. But they give a response rate for direct marketing campaigns overall as being 2.61%. 2.61%. And I know that sounds pretty small. That means that for every 10,000 people you solicit, only 261 of them respond. Or to put this in more manageable terms, for every 100 people you use direct marketing on, only 2.6 of them respond. That sounds kind of small, but did you know that for nonprofit fundraisers, it's more than twice that amount? NPOs that use direct marketing have a 5.35% response rate on the average. And that's all forms of direct marketing. Telemarketing is really interesting. Telemarketing is very, very responsive, and for-profit organizations get about a 7.44% using direct marketing tactics using the telephone. But did you realize that nonprofit organizations have nearly a 20% response rate? It's true. Almost 3 times the response rate. So even though you hate to make those phone calls and it's a bother and everything, it really is very productive activity. Now, I know some of you, as we talk about direct marketing, you might be concerned with something called the National Do Not Call Registration. And the federal government does have a National Do Not Call registry at donotcall.gov. And U.S. residents can go to the website and register their telephone number so that for-profit organizations cannot call them for 5 years. And I know there's violations of it, but usually it takes a little bit of time for the for-profit organizations to realize that you're registered and to that matriculate into their databases. But that's only for for-profit organizations. Nonprofit organizations and churches don't have to discriminate their phone list by the do not call list. In fact, if you've done business with an organization, then they have every right to call you as well. It seems the only way that you can get off your vendor's list for call solicitations is to stop doing business with them. But I just wanted to let you know that, because since we're focusing on nonprofit organizations, you don't have to worry about the National Do Not Call Registry. And you can find more information at donotcall.gov. But let's talk about some of the characteristics of direct marketing, because direct marketing is distinguished from other types of marketing because you can obtain a measurable response from the target audience, different from its target audience. Effective direct marketing relies heavily on use of a database. Nonprofit organizations develop and maintain supporter databases where they keep all kinds of information, and we're going to talk more about that. In fact, that's part of your assignment for this particular lecture, is to create a template or to create a document where you have different blanks to fill in that you think that you might want to collect for an organization that's known to you. Maybe a nonprofit organization that you've read about or that you aspire to create, to make a document that could be like a computer screen or a database that you would develop on Microsoft Access or some other database like Blackbaud or Salesforce, and create this demographic information about your donors so that you could search it and find it. But we'll talk more about that. What we're talking about with direct marketing, one thing that I need to tell you is I'm not talking about face-to-face solicitation. I'll talk about that here again in another lecture, but I lump face-to-face connection more with personal selling, and most textbook authors do too, but I'll explain that later. But we're going to be mostly talking about snail mail, mailing brochures, mailing letters, mailing appeals, making phone calls, sending direct emails, making other type of direct internet solicitation to your target audience. So this is how it works. With a direct marketing message is created, it's targeted at a specific group. The reason why we have the database is because if we want to send a message to people about a fundraising golf tournament that we're going to have, we want to target that message to people who have participated in the golf tournament in the past. Maybe their hobby is golf, or maybe they have a general interest in sports. As the marketer, as the nonprofit marketer, you would have to make the decision of how wide you want your audience to be. And we'll get into this, but sometimes the messages cost money, and so we want to take that into consideration. Sometimes there's other costs, like donor fatigue. If a donor gets too many emails, or if a stakeholder is overwhelmed by all these different activities that the organization is doing, they may unlist themselves from your list. So we've got to take that into consideration as well. We target where we want to send the message. Very rarely, very, very rarely do we want to send a message to every stakeholder. And then the audience receives it, and then they respond. If you're asking for a donation, the response rate is easy to calculate. How many messages did you send? And then that's the denominator in the fraction, where the numerator is the number of donations you received. So if you solicited 1,000 people and you got 50 donations, you had a 5% response rate. And so you can see this is very advantageous to us as nonprofit organization managers, because now we can make decisions about what is effective and what is not effective. So there are some advantages of direct marketing, several advantages. One of them is flexibility, and it refers to your ability to send the message you want, when you want, and in the format of your choosing. Targetability refers to your ability to send your message to the individuals of your selection rather than broadcasting it to a mass audience. Measurability refers to your ability to test, track, and analyze the various dimensions of your campaigns to improve effectiveness. Accountability is linked to measurability because you're able to measure and analyze the various components of a specific campaign that you can know, so that you can know which campaign and which tactical elements that you've chosen are effective and which are not. And then I've added privacy, which refers to A, your ability to send your message to individuals without it being received by unintended audiences, and B, your supporters' improved likelihood of receiving your message without typical distractions that they would have in other broadcast communication, including email. Your email inbox is probably as large as mine. It seems like dozens of emails come in every hour, hundreds every day. And so these are some of the advantages. I want to talk now about some of the types of direct marketing. I mentioned them at the beginning of this lecture, but I want to state them again. Generally, we have these categories: direct mail, internet direct email, which may be some other specified messaging that we use, including social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and then telemarketing, the use of the telephone, which can also include text messages, which is very effective in marketing these days. Maybe not quite as effective as a direct call. Nonetheless, it's still effective. So these are the types of marketing that we're going to look at. However, as you can imagine, these three choices at our disposal need to be scrutinized so we know which one is going to be the best to use, rather than trying to use all of them and wear our donors or our stakeholders out. It's better to choose what's going to be best. So here are some dimensions that I've constructed for you to consider. And among the three different types of direct marketing, speed is probably the slowest with direct mail. So if you're going to use a mailing, a brochure, or a letter, an appeal letter, an ask that's in a written form, and send it either first class or bulk mail, it's going to take several days for the post office to deliver it. It's probably going to take longer for a direct mail to take place because there's a lower priority to circulate direct mail among mail carriers. And in some of my previous experiences, I found some zip codes don't distribute my bulk mail item sometimes for several days, even a week, longer than other alternatives. And so when you consider speed, that may be something that you want to take into consideration. Sending direct mail to individuals could really tax your entire system too, but I'll get more into that with some of the others. Obviously, if you construct a well-written email, you can send direct mail very, very quickly, and then you're only dependent upon the person opening their inbox to receive your email, especially if the email you have on record is not the one that's connected to their portable device. And another consideration is if you decide to telemarket, to use phone calls, that it takes time and manpower to work through all of those phone numbers. Now, if you have a texting software package, you can do it just almost as fast as direct email. So speed is something to take into consideration. Cost. And this might surprise you, but actually the highest cost is telemarketing because of the labor hours that it takes to make those phone calls, and perhaps the training that has to take place of those employees who are making the calls. Now, if they're sending texts, maybe not the case, but when we get into back-end integration, maybe it still is. But people usually cost more than other things. Second on the priority list of cost would be direct mail because of postage. Postage is a very high price, and oftentimes the cost of the printed materials is affixed to that too. And you might be surprised how much an offer that's sent through the mail can cost. A brochure that is designed to be a mailer and is color, it might cost more than $1 per piece. And then to affix postage onto it as well may add another 55 cents, or unless you're doing bulk mail, it'd be a little bit less. And so the cost of printing the item, the cost of mailing the item is substantial. And then, of course, the least expensive is the email, the direct email, because it's just about researching your target group, constructing the message, maybe creating some artwork or some links, creating website materials, what have you, putting it all together and sending it out into an email. But in addition to cost, we need to consider multimedia. Now, a colorful brochure can look really attractive. An email with links might be very, very useful so that people can look at the things they're interested in and discard the rest. And especially if they have a link to donate, that multimedia button that's designed on your email can very easily take them to Give Now. But the phone call multimedia is still has some variability because the caller can be trained so that when they reach a stakeholder, they can present specific materials based on the phone call the constituents' answers or responses to the phone call. And I know that people are very, very good at this particular skill, are oftentimes salespeople. And I have an alma mater that calls me a couple times a year, and the student that calls is a marketing student usually, and they're trained to ask over and over again, are you sure you wouldn't want to give this amount? And sort of in a de-escalating value, putting that offer out there over and over again. Now, the next item that we want to compare is scalability, because if you're doing a printed item, obviously the more you print, the more it costs, but there's usually a timeline associated with printing it. So if you've already sent your goods to the printer and you're in line to get your job done, adding another 5,000 pieces may not be that easy. In fact, adding another 25 pieces may not be easy unless you over-ordered. And so scalability for printed material is not so easy, whereas for electronic media, it may be just adding another list just a few clicks away. So scalability, having the capability to add to the message. And then the next one is list availability. So I've talked about this a little bit already. I'll talk about it some more, but having a house list means that you've got a donor list or a stakeholder list, that demographic information that's in your assignment for this week that you would collect, and you would want to be able to analyze it so you could restrict who you're sending the direct marketing message to based on that list. And so you would want to be able to collect the right information for an email. Some people don't give an email. Or for an address, believe it or not, a lot of donors don't give a mailing address. Or maybe that information is outdated, it's not as readily available. Now, additionally, list availability could have something to do with what we call a broker list or a purchase list. And you'll find out in your nonprofit organization, if you don't know already, that there are many, many marketers out there that are willing to sell you their lists for a price, of course. They want to sell it to you because they want to help you match constituents to their list, and they want to collect money for that. So that list availability is something that you want to take into consideration before you choose a medium of direct marketing. Then there's back-end integration, and that refers to the ease which you can respond to someone who has generated a response to you from a direct marketing message. In other words, sometimes I think it might be better to give an example. An example that I would give of this is if you sent a solicitation letter asking for gifts to a specific appeal. When someone sends back a check and you receive that in the mail, the back-end integration would refer to the gift receipt and thank you letter that you would send back. Or perhaps you would send back a gift receipt with all that tax-deductible information on it, the correct messaging that this gift was given without exchange of goods and services, and you'd have the date and the amount and all the stuff the IRS requires. And in addition to that, you might send additional messaging because now you know that they're interested in this cause. You might want to give them more information because maybe they would consider a second gift or additional gifts or monthly giving in the future. Now, if it's a response to an email and you've got that give button, that Give Now button that's in your email, that would take them to a website where they could easily enter in their information. And maybe the back-end integration that you would choose is to immediately send them an email message that says, we've received your gift, a gift letter will be coming to you soon. Whether in their inbox, or maybe you would ask for more information that they didn't provide, a snail mail address or additional information at that point, so they could receive their gift letter, and then you know more information about them. It may be that your offer, though, has to do with taking a survey so that you can find buyer behavior out. And so it may be a simply thank you. Thank you for, maybe it's the last screen of your survey. That's part of your back end integration. Is thank you, the survey is complete. We really appreciate you participating. You might, maybe there was a caveat in participating. You say thank you for your participation. You've been entered into our drawing for a free gift. But it's really important that you have that integrated in there. And personally, I believe it's important to have more than one back-end integration responses, because you can't really thank people too much. And sometimes the responses are telemarketing responses, no matter what the type of donation direct marketing medium was. In faith-based organizations, I think it's a good opportunity to say thank you. I'm a person that you helped, or I work for this organization, and you've helped out the cause that I've devoted my life to. Thank you very much. How can I pray for you? And then guess what? You begin to learn more and more information about your donor, and of course you want to collect that. But another comparable dimension is personalization, and that refers to the ability to tailor a message to an individual. The level of personalization could range from addressing them by name to maybe having some analyzing of their donor data so that you can tailor your response to them or your direct messaging to them. Where, for example, our pretend golf tournament, we might say, thank you for participating in last year's golf tournament. Our next golf tournament is going to be on June 1st. Please save the date. On the other hand, maybe you're asking someone who didn't participate, but you know their hobby is golf. You may change the message to personalize for them and say, hey, I remember that you love to play the game of golf. Would you join us in our 2020 Calvary Classic Golf Tournament on June 1st? So see, personalization can have a dramatic effect, even if it's somewhat in a form characteristic. Personally, when I do that sort of thing with personalization, sometimes I like to write on the solicitation letters just a little note if I know something about them. I might say, hey, I'm still praying for about your eye surgery. We'll have to connect at the event and you'll tell me how that came out, or feel free to give me a call, or I've been praying for your prayer requests. Please call me to update your prayer requests. That's personalization. And then finally, flexibility. Direct mail is flexible in the sense that nonprofit managers have a lot of alternatives for developing the direct mail packet. However, elements of the packet are typically standardized for mass production, and of course we want to have a reduction of postal rate if that seems appropriate. Telemarketing is more flexible than direct mail because people interact with the supporters and react to supporter questions or statements. And then internet technology is flexible because supporters have a high level of control about the information they receive. Of course, they can easily delete your message without reading it too. But if they see something really interesting on that message and then they see an option for different types of links, different types of responses, that might have a high level of appeal to them. So as you can see, there are a lot of comparable dimensions, so you can decide which the best form or forms of direct marketing there are. But as you think through that, you need to develop a direct marketing program. And of course, what we've been talking about the dimensions of your direct marketing, we need to develop a plan. And that plan would include not only the type of direct marketing that you'll use, but will have taken into consideration those dimensions. And see, now that you know what it is that you're going to do, you have to decide what is it that you want to accomplish. What's your objective? In other words, do you want to attract donations? Do you want to increase membership in your nonprofit society? Do you want to increase members of your church? Do you want to sell tickets to an event? You see, it's better to develop objectives that you can measure, like selling tickets. You can see how many of those you've sold using the direct marketing technique. Donations, we've already explained that. Being able to link the results to your direct marketing tactic will be something you want to build into your plan. You also want to develop activities blueprints. And what I mean by this is you want to line it out step by step, all of the different activities that need to take place. For example, a direct mailing here at Calvary, when I was doing marketing at Calvary University, oftentimes the planning would begin 4 months in advance, because I would decide what the medium was that I wanted to select, what type of direct marketing I wanted to use. Then I had to create the messaging and construct the materials. That included the artwork, the design. That has to go through a process, a vetting process. More people have to be involved. People need time to give their constructive criticism. And then the job has to be bid out once we decide what it is we want to do. And sometimes there are design changes that take place even after we bid out printing, or after we decide who or how the email or the video is going to be constructed. And then the timing's got to be put in place so that if there's printed materials, we can get in line at the printer so that they can have the item printed in time for us to stuff envelopes and affix postage and get it mailed so that it arrives on the delivery date that we've thought of in advance. So for example, at the end of the year, Calvary would typically have a year-end appeal, and because research shows that people typically will not give much to nonprofit organizations until after Black Friday. Till Black Friday, when all the special deals are. They want to buy their Christmas presents. Then their purse strings open up. Some people might argue that you got to wait till after Cyber Monday. But Giving Tuesday follows those on purpose. So a great time for a solicitation to arrive would probably be Saturday after Black Friday, and at least on or before Giving Tuesday. And so to do that, I've got to know when to mail it so that it arrives at most of the addresses that I'm soliciting to. So I'm probably not going to take a chance of using bulk mail. I'm probably going to use first class mail, and I'm probably going to mail it on Monday or Tuesday before Thanksgiving, since the holiday is going to slow things down in the week. That means the materials have to be printed and stuffed and postage affixed the weekend before Thanksgiving. So you begin to see how you have to back out and understand sort of the blueprint for a direct marketing program to take place. And then you have to draft an action plan, which basically says this is who's going to do which pieces of all the activities. You've got a blueprint, and now we've got to describe the activities that need to take place so that we're sure that our blueprint is realistic, and so that we're sure who's going to do which tasks. If it's done outside of the nonprofit organization, you may be able to speed through this process by having a printing house that specializes in not only printing but stuffing and affixing postage and mailing the materials, all according to your specified plan. But most of us work for nonprofit organizations that do much of the work in-house, and so you'll need to develop details for this part of the plan. You need to develop a budget when you develop a plan. And I know this is tough, but you got to think through all of these things to be able to create a budget and decide how you're going to do it. But you really need to do this before your budget year begins so that you can build it into your fiscal budget. And so all of these things that I'm talking about, when done well, will be done more than a year in advance. so that it can be part of your budget. Now, mind you, once you've gone through all these activities, it may be that you can use your plans that have been realized as as sort of like a template for future events. So you kind of know what it's going to be like to organize a phone call campaign. You begin to realize what it's going to take to have a direct mail. Oh, and there's one step that may be part of your plan that I'll talk about again probably in number 5 of our developing a direct marketing program. But I think it's a good idea as you develop a plan to send a test item to yourself if you're using mail, or to do some role playing as you're planning, so that you don't go through a lot of training or spend a lot of cost in putting your providers out and giving you a customized bid on your order without sort of testing what you're doing. Now, step 2 is to research and purchase your mailing list. You may decide you don't want to purchase a mailing list, but you still need to research who it is that you're going to send the message to. Now, we've already talked about this, but when you create your direct marketing program, you need to think through this step very thoroughly. You can use part of your internal list, or you could use all of your internal list. What I've found is that the more data you collect, the more parts you put together, but you very rarely send it to all. When you send it to all your constituents over and over again, they get fatigued and then begin to unsubscribe to your emails. So you'll figure out who it is that you want to send to. If they bought tickets last year, you want to make sure that they receive your direct marketing campaign. If they showed interest last year, you want to add them to the list. If what it is that you're doing falls into a category they're interested in, or somebody participated in a fundraising dinner in the fall and now you want to see if they want to participate in an auction event in the spring, then you decide who it is that's going to be a part of your list. Or you might decide to use a list broker, which is an intermediator that might be able to take information you have from your database and give you a list of people they believe are similar. So in other words, the demographics of a person might be similar. And I'll give you here in a few minutes some of the demographics of a typical donor, so that'll be useful for you. But typically when we deal with salespeople who broker lists, what they want to do so that you're successful and so that you'll be wanting to use them again is asking you, well, what's the profile of your donor? And so it's a good idea to know that and to have some information about your donors, so you can say, you know, most of our donors fall into this category. Maybe they're blue collar workers. Maybe they make between $30,000 and $50,000 a year. Maybe they're all in 6-digit incomes. Maybe all of our donors seem to be affluent or wealthy. Maybe our donors are age 50 to 70. Maybe the bulk of our donors are age 20 to 30. Those are things that you need to figure out so that you can talk to the list broker and get the best list. So here are my advice. Look for the best donors. Find out who they are and what makes them the best donors. Model your best donors now that you've identified them. What characteristics do they share? And then, armed with a description of the characteristics, you can begin to seek individuals either from a list broker or on your own. So knowing and understanding them is important, which is why I gave you the database assignment this particular week. But let's go on to step 3 of developing a direct marketing program. Develop creative materials for your direct marketing campaign. This is of course, part of developing a plan, but now you're actually carrying it out. And this is where your plan gets changed many times, but you needed the plan so that you had some parameters and some budget, some guidelines to operate within. If you're writing a letter, there's some things that I would like to suggest. because when you develop your materials, you want it to be well written. And conventional wisdom is to make your appeal letter as short as possible. You want as much white space on your letter as possible. And the reason for that is because many times people don't have the time or energy or desire to read a lengthy letter. But as you're crafting it, make sure that it's well written, your grammar is flawless, and that it communicates exactly what you want. If your cause is really important and it's a capital campaign letter, it might be longer than a page. But craft your letter using these guidelines. Number one, begin with a compelling opening to get interest. Let people know that the mission continues, that your gifts in the past have helped. Here's a person pictured on this page that's been changed as a result of past donations. Begin with a compelling opening so that you have interest. Cry out the injustice that's in hand, or tell people there's a cause that now you need them to rally behind. Number two is be very succinct in how you state the problem or the enemy. It's useful in some cases. They're kind of the same thing. But talk about the problem, a lack of funding, sometimes growth that's unplanned is a good, compelling problem to have. But whether it's positive or negative, it's important for you to state what your problem is and clearly ask for the proper amount of money. Oftentimes I see people in nonprofit organizations be vague or unclear about what their need is. If you say you need $1.3 million, state it, and maybe somebody will send you $1 million. But if you just say we're trying to collect as much money as we can, people don't want to give to that cause. State your problem. Describe your cause in terms of the people you serve or the needs to address or your successes. People want to know the story and that there's value. So number four is to tell a story such as an evocative case history. Maybe, again, talk about the person that's pictured, that you started in the opening by saying, this is the picture of someone's life who's changed. Now maybe you'll spend a couple, 3 sentences telling how their lives have changed because of the mission of your organization. Number 5, use short sentences, familiar words. Don't be verbose. Use plenty of white space. Write with emotion if you can. If you don't feel strongly about your mission, why will your reader feel strongly about it? And then number 6, ask directly for a donation near the beginning of the letter and at the end of the letter. And include something specific in a postscript. Say, P.S., by the way, we really need this money, so that you've got it on there 3 times. And mention a premium, the premium donors can receive by responding by a specific date. Maybe a matching gift, maybe a bumper sticker, or some sort of a decal that you can send to them. A lot of organizations give tote bags and t-shirts, and you might laugh about that, but that works, because now people can identify with the cause. And just like your insurance agent wants to give you magnets and pens and other items that you might keep around, when they wear that t-shirt or they use that tote bag at the grocery store, that branding is reimposed on their brain so that they're beginning to think about that. You know, as you develop materials, think about the response device. Is it going to be a tear-off coupon? Is it going to be a response card and a return envelope? How's that going to fit into the outer envelope? How's all of it going to look bundled together? Maybe there will be some other materials, maybe a prayer card or a picture with someone that you need to be prayed for. And then you put all that together in the complete package. And at that point, I think it's a good idea to get other people's opinions outside of the creative team and say, what do you think? If you got this in the mail, how would you respond to this? Step 4, produce, test, and mail direct mail packets. Again, I mentioned this before, but now it's time to send maybe 10 or 15 packets out. See how they arrive. See if they're damaged. See if there's postage due. See how other people in the organization, other stakeholders, maybe some of your donors who are volunteers could receive it, and you could solicit reaction from them. That way, if an adjustment needs to be made, you can do it before you go into mass production. And then number 5 is measure the results and refine your program. I keep talking about this with direct marketing because it's absolutely crucial. You want to know what your successes and what your failures are for the purpose of being able to refine the process and doing better and better in the future. Don't hesitate to try something new. On the other hand, if you try something new and it doesn't work, try something else. Know where your baseline is and how productive you were there, and then continue to measure the results over and over again. Although traditional direct mail has received emphasis in my talk, it's because it's one of the most popular direct marketing types. Direct email and online giving is growing, but I've noticed that a lot of churches will offer online giving, but few people actually give. And the thing is that when you use online giving, typically there's a fee, there's a price to be paid for that. But the combination of online giving and direct mail can be very powerful too. So direct mail oftentimes says, save a stamp, go online. Give today, our need is urgent. Give today, don't wait, by mailing a response back to us. And of course in direct email, you could say give online, but if you prefer, you can send a check to this address, or call us at our call center and we can take your debit or credit card information. So there's a lot of options that you have with the direct marketing approach. I really do recommend that you use a blended approach for your direct marketing campaign. Use a blended approach. Successful direct marketing campaigns rely on building in multiple paths to current and future supporters. Nonprofit managers should do using both online and offline tactics, and use more than one path. Conventional wisdom in marketing is that it usually takes several messages for people to respond to an offer. So you may get a 7% result from a direct mail offering, and then you might get another 4% result from a direct email offering that follows up. And in fact, some of those people receiving the email in the same target group may have set aside their envelope for payday, and now they're prompted to remember the envelope and they write a check. So a blended approach, a multiple approach, is very important. And I want to warn you, this is a warning number 2, is focus on the program. What I mean by that is I've found in fundraising that people don't want to give to the general fund of a nonprofit organization. They really don't. Oh, some will. Some realize that the organization has to be sustained by the people who work there and they have to pay their light bills. But what I found is mostly people want to be delighted by knowing their money went towards the cause. That's why some organizations will even advertise that 90% of your funds go directly to help the people that you intend to help, that you're giving towards. And so administrative costs become a public issue because nonprofit marketers realize that people want to give to the cause. And so you might want to say that you can help underprivileged students by giving to this cause. And underprivileged students may be students that can't pay their complete bill. And so rather than allowing them to become a bad debt, the organization takes money off the bottom line and forgives their debt. But supporters can recompense for that because they're giving to underprivileged students. So people want to contribute to a cause, not an organization. So make sure that the need, the cause, or the program with which you're asking their help for is emphasized, not the organization. Number 3 is to target your campaigns. You know, most nonprofit organizations have multiple programs that's going on. And remember, certain donors want to help in certain areas. Women's clinics, for example, they may not be as interested in sexual health as they are in unplanned pregnancy. They may not be as interested as aftercare for mothers who have given birth as they are from the cause of convincing women not to abort their child. And so it's important for you to target to the people who want to give. On the other hand, some people want to help new moms. Some people want to help women who are looking for body health and preserving themselves. So think about your target audience and collect that support on a database if possible. Nonprofits should have a database, and we're going to talk about that in the very next lecture as we continue to talk about volunteers and major givers. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Some strategic approaches to attract major gifts. And first of all, I want to talk about individual donors. So nowadays there are a lot of people who say things like, well, most of our gifts need to shift to alternative forms of income, or they need to shift to businesses or corporations. And while I appreciate their a willingness to try new market areas, most gifts traditionally and continue to be from individual donors. Individuals are capable of major gifts as well as small gifts. But I just want to remind you that the small gift that's given on a regular basis, like a monthly basis, that's usually 50% or more of an organization's charitable contributions. So you want to have those small gifts, but you want to have those major gifts as well. So I want to talk a little bit about three different types of ways to look at donors. My favorite is the rule of thirds, and so I'll describe that last. Let me first talk about the 10-90 rule, the 90-10 rule, or the 80-20 rule. Now, the 90-10 rule and the 80-20 rule are very much alike. It just depends on who you're talking to as to which proportion they give. And you've probably heard conversations at church that go something like this, is that 20% of the people do 80% of the work. Or you might have heard 10% of the people give 90% of the work. In nonprofit organizations, oftentimes they say something like 20% of the donors give 80% of the contributions. Some say 10% of the donors give 90% of the contributions. But what I've found, and I've worked with a number of nonprofit organizations, is that the closest rule of thumb is the rule of thirds. So let me describe that for you, and you can see it on the slide, is that the top 10 to 20 donors give 1/3 of the organization's receipts and contributions. 1/3. So if you think about that, in most nonprofit organizations, 10 to 20 people are giving 1/3 of the money. Don't you think you want to build a relationship with those people? Of course you do. Now, the next third is given by the next 80 to 100 donors. And so potentially, if you understand what I'm saying, is that 120 people typically give 2/3 of the giving to most nonprofit organizations. And so it would be advantageous for you to develop a major donor program and maybe have a director of major gifts, because that's traditionally where nonprofit organizations get most of their money. And you may already have these donors in your database, but you need to develop the relationship with them and disciple them on a path to giving at maximum propensity. Now, the last third is given by all remaining supporters. And sometimes this escalates up to nearly a half, and much of that is given by regular small monthly donors. But this isn't just for Calvary University. This is for many other organizations that I've worked with. The rule of thirds seems to be a good way of looking at it. Nevertheless, whether you go to the 90-10, the 80-20, the rule of thirds, it's still valuable for you to know that somebody needs to pay attention and develop relationships with a few people who give to the organization. And as with large-scale strategic planning, it would be best for a nonprofit to start with an objective analysis of itself and its offer. And we call this through the eyes of the potential donor. So we're concerned with seeing through the eyes of donors capable of making 5, 6, 7, even 8-figure major gift donations. So it's important to segment within this group, because major gifts can come from several sources, including individuals and charitable foundations, possibly from government when we get into grant writing, and additionally, even sometimes from corporations. So I want to give you an example of an objective offer analysis. Number one has to do with how well the offer addresses what the donors see as social priorities. See, people want to give to causes that they believe in. And so how well does your cause address that donor's social priority? So knowing the person who's the major giver is going to help reveal what that answer is. Number two, compared to others addressing these social priorities, what's the offer's differential advantage, special capability, or unique approach? In other words, what's distinguishing you from all the others out there asking for money? What are your distinctives? Remember, that was week one's assignment. What were the distinctives? Number three, how realistic is the nonprofit's set of statements that describe the real benefits its target publics will receive from this offer? So people do want to know what they're going to get out of it or what they can expect from it, and they may not personally want to be rewarded, but they want to see that the reward to their cause is there. Number four, how many people will benefit from the program? How will they benefit? So we talk about impact. Number five, what objectives, measurable objectives, will be used to assess the offer's performance in providing the needs or meeting the program objectives? How will this work out in the organization's budget? So measurable results is something that people want to see. If you don't believe me, just look at the copies of USA Today that are sold. People want to see those charts and graphs. People want to see the measurable results. Number six, why is this the time to address this need? Number seven, what is a reasonable time frame for identifying potential donors, identifying personal values, building relationships, and closing the funding agreements? It takes months and sometimes years to develop the appropriate relationship for major donors. And so you can't get in a hurry and expect a director of major donors to perform in the first few months. They may not perform well in the first year, but the longer they're working at those donors, the more productive that they'll be. Be realistic. Number 8, what other important public figures are willing to have their name associated with this offer? So non-financial support can come in the form of endorsements, and maybe a teacher at a college, for example, may say, well, I really want this. This is going to improve my ability to teach in the classroom. If you have an endorsement like that, that's a non-financial support that you can't refuse. Maybe somebody who's been successful in a certain arena speaks up and says, hey, I had someone in my family that was affected by this cause, and I recommend you support them because there are people out there like my daughter or like my family member who needs your support. Number 9, how much interest will the media have? How might this ability, or lack of it, attract media? And how will it be used in the capital campaign's strategic and tactical design? So if the media gets a hold of it, that's free publicity, that's free advertisement, but that free advertisement sometimes can be bad advertisement. Some for-profit organizations say that all advertisement is good advertisement, even bad press is good advertisement. For a nonprofit organization, bad advertising can be devastating. So you've got to ask these questions. And then number 10, what is the nonprofit not doing that would really capture the interest of potential major gift donors? So maybe there's something we need to package together with it. Maybe there are some other details that we need to make known. Maybe there are other items that we need to place in the offer. And you really need to think through this as you think about who in your donor base would be great at helping with this major gift. You know, as you begin to think, who are you going to ask your major gift for? So here's where, if you've lingered through this this particular session with me, I'm giving you a freebie for the assignment, because here are some ideas that I have about content that you would have in a major gift information file. Although this is very, very brief, and at the same time it's very, very subjective and broad. But of course you want their major demographic information, including their date of birth, their address, their contact. You want their date of birth so you can send them a birthday card or an anniversary card. You may want their anniversary. But you also want to know the age of your demographic. You want to know how they're connected with other people. So I put family and relationship because maybe they're friends with the chairman of the board. And if that's the case, then you might want the chairman of the board to be the one who goes and asks them for a major gift. But begin to understand how people are interrelated. Get detailed personal and professional history. Understand their income, their net worth, their giving scorecard. And there are ways you can buy this information and get major credit information about your donors. That can be purchased. But oftentimes we find these things out as we learn to interact with people. We realize, well, they live in a neighborhood where all the houses cost more than $500,000 a piece. And so we might put estimated value of home $500,000 to $750,000. And that can be a discriminating factor that can help us as we think about asking them in the future. And I'll explain that in just a moment. We might also consider financial and legal advisors. Are they their own investor? Are they dependent on the same investment firm the school is? And one of the reasons we need to know this information is because they may ask us some questions about giving a major gift that has to do with their investments, stock or other funds, or even their retirement fund. Maybe their lawyer is our lawyer. Maybe we can save some costs and consolidate some of the activity that needs to go on for a major gift. What are they a member of? For faith-based communities, what church do they belong to? How are they active? What leadership roles do they have? Ask what their hobbies are. And then construct a chronology of contact with the donor. And it's not just past offers that you've made and asking them for money. Be sure and keep track of their last donations and what cause or what campaign they gave to. Help them to understand, help make it so you can understand what their history has been and how that's changed, how that's transformed. Maybe they're giving less, maybe they're giving more. And these are important clues for you as you decide who in your donor base are on your donor list to focus on. Also, you want to construct a relationship building plan and the current stage that you're in the plan. Personally, I like to have stages that I've already made a contact with them and I found things out about them, and now I have a process of taking them through the discipleship of giving a major gift. And so for your organization that may look differently. First, usually I like to invite them to the facility or to a major event, introduce them to students or to alumni. I like to let them know who it is they've helped and introduce them maybe to some key players in the organization. And then ask them to give a large amount that maybe isn't a major gift, but get them used to giving to the organization and work my way up to the major gift. It would be a mistake for me just to go to a wealthy person who barely knows the organization and give them a long pitch about who we are and what our mission is and then ask them for $1 million. That very rarely works. Now, another part of the record of contact, and I said I would explain this, but one of the reasons we kind of want to understand their income or their net worth is because it's not unreasonable to ask for a major gift that's about 10% of their annual income. I know you're probably thinking about tithing to the church, but people who are wealthy and some of the most generous givers I know actually give 90% or more of their annual income to charitable organizations so they don't have to pay income tax on it. They don't need the income. They've already paid for their house. They don't have major expenses, and so they give their money away. Or a one-time gift of 2 to 5% of their net worth is not unreasonable, especially if they're going through some sort of a change in life. Maybe they're ready to shift gears in what they're doing. So you probably understand that some traditional tactics for major gift fundraising is to focus on the individuals, because individuals provide the majority of philanthropic support for all nonprofits. So we have to develop those relationships with them. There's likely to be thousands of millionaires in any nonprofit state. In fact, they're probably in your own constituency and you don't realize it, because what I have found in this profession is most millionaires don't dress like millionaires, they don't drive cars like millionaires, and they don't live in houses like millionaires in the way most people think about millionaires. And then we need to focus on donor benefits. Usually that revolves around their need to fulfill a cause or a mission. But there may be a lot of reasons besides emotional ones. Maybe it's for the tax benefit, because they have a 401k that they have to take a minimum amount of every year, and they would rather have you contact their investment broker and arrange for a gift to be given from their 401k directly to the organization so that they don't have to pay taxes on it. It's a real thing, because once you get to a certain age, people have to take a certain percentage of the total of their 401k out, and they don't want to have to pay that higher tax bracket rate because, again, they don't need the money. Then we need to ask for the gift. A business world marketer would recognize this as the imperative that we need to close. In fact, in the nonprofit world, we use this. We say we need to close the deal. Experience suggests that the larger the gift request, the better it is that the close be made by the nonprofit's most senior executive. So you want it to be the director of the clinic, the president of the university, the chairman of the board, whoever is the person that's the face of the organization is best to close the deal in major gift fundraising. And then it's important to involve board members. They're important sources of nonprofit funding, and sometimes they might be your major givers. They're already giving of themselves, so ask them to help. With honor of being a board member comes the responsibility of financially supporting the organization. I'm not kidding when I tell you one of the most asked questions that I get from major donors is how many board members do you have, and how many of them give annually to the organization? And oftentimes they want to see that. They want to see the evidence of that. And it's a fair question, because if the people leading the organization aren't supporting the organization, they shouldn't be on the board of the organization. And why would I want to invest in that organization? So remember the board members and be sure and ask them. And then express appreciation. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but I don't think we can overdo it when it comes to expressing appreciation for gifts. I think it's very, very important. Now, I promised you earlier in this lecture I'd tell you sort of what the profile is for a major donor. Here it is. Typical major donors are age 50 to 70. They're conservative, they're educated, they care, they share. They're a successful entrepreneur, or they're a professional, or they're a member of a wealthy family. They usually have some involvement in a cause, and so before you ask a major donor for a gift, you might want to have them come and speak in a class, or you might want to have them come and give a talk to your clients. You might want to have them come and help serve food on Thanksgiving Day. You might want to have them develop a heart for the organization because they've worked in it. They've been involved in the cause. Also, a major donor profile includes a history of donations, maybe not to your organization, maybe to other organizations. You know, that information can be found out. It is typically very, very widely available. And a major donor has grown and financially secure children. They're not worried about putting them through college or giving them a start. Their children are already secure. The major donor is typically financially knowledgeable. They haven't become wealthy because they've not paid attention to investments. And they usually have personal assets 20 to 50 times the amount you're seeking as a goal, which is why we might consider asking them for 2.5% of their net wealth. And usually a major donor, these are typical major donors, are planning for a lifestyle change, including retirement. But they may include someone who's saying that they're going to semi-retirement. They want to dabble. These people can be great volunteers and then be great major donors, or developed into major donors. So, what are the tasks related to effective nonprofit major gift fundraising? We've got to find the potential donors. We've got to decide where to spend time and resources. And for this, I suggest you collect as much information as you can and then rate the donors. Sometimes I've used total donations given in a lifetime to my organization, and other times I use their giving for the last fiscal year, their total giving for the last fiscal year, and began to organize some of those donors. But then I can't forget those who have the propensity to give. Maybe they've only given a $500 gift, but they could give a $500,000 gift. I've got to rate them as well. We need to build relationships, and then we need to make reasonable assignments. And what I mean by this is the number of donors per fundraiser. So personally, I would give the president, the chairman of the board, the director of the organization, I'd give them the top 10 donors. And then other fundraisers I would let them focus on between 50 and 125 at the most. Remember, you want to be strategic because in most nonprofit organizations, 1/3 of the donation income comes from 120 donors, the top 120 donors. But I want to share something with you. I have a family member that I talked to recently who works in a worldly occupation. He actually works for a casino, and he said he was a customer service manager. And when I asked him what it is he did, and he said, I build relationships with gamblers. I build relationships with gamblers. See, casinos have caught on to this, and that's definitely a for-profit organization. And his job was to build relationships with gamblers, and they're not just any gamblers, they're gamblers who gamble, who are sort of like the top losers of the organization, or they have the highest propensity to gamble. And I asked him how many clients that he had to service, and he told me 125. So even casinos kind of have this down to a science. And he said he would call them, he would offer them tickets, he'd offer them free dinners, he'd offer them incentives. I don't know how gambling works exactly, but bonus points and other types of incentives, tickets to race car events and football and baseball and other sporting events, to build those relationships and make them think about and appreciate the relationship they have with him as a customer service representative. So build relationships, make reasonable assignments, and then prepare for prospective objections or barriers. You do all you can to research and know what their causes are, but maybe it would be easy for them to misunderstand your cause. And so it's important for you to delineate that, understand that, help them to get past that. You know what a good car salesman does? He gets over your objectives, your objections. He moves past your no's. He gives you solutions to your no's. So I don't want you to be a used car salesman per se, but when we're raising funds for major gifts and you're the director of your organization or you're the president of your organization, you have to be willing to take away the bite or the sting or the barrier so that people are willing to give. And then prepare to close the gift before you ask. Personally, I believe it's important to make an offer in writing, especially in faith-based organizations. I was raised in a Christian home, and my father taught me not to make any spontaneous decisions about major financial decisions. So I recommend that you prepare something and then ask them to pray about it. Even if they're ready to give you an answer, which may likely be no, say, I don't want the answer right now, I want you to pray about it. That might keep them from telling you no right off the bat. So ask them to pray about it and to study it, but be sure you communicate to them everything they need. Tell them that they're welcome to ask questions now, they're willing to ask questions in the future, and that you need to have a decision by such and such a date, and you'll contact them again. What I found is major gift givers usually contact me the next day or within the next few days before I need to know, because they want to let me know that they're making arrangements and when the funds will be available. So be well prepared. And, as you ask for major gifts, just remember that there are alternative prospect considerations. I have cash highlighted because we mostly think about cash, but their gifts could also be stock, could be land, buildings, on land, could be equipment, boats, cars, almost anything of value. In my nonprofit development experience, I've seen many times when people gave jewelry. And there's annuities. Now, an annuity may be when they want to invest in us so that we pay them a percentage, but upon their death or upon the completion of the annuity, we keep the amount that they invested in us. A trust is oftentimes where we become part owner of their property, or maybe full owner of their property, and then they use it until they die. Life insurance is not unusual. I am aware of a number of donors who've taken out policies where my nonprofit organizations are the sole beneficiary. They keep the life insurance property for the sole purpose of giving some sort of benefit to their favorite charity. And if you think about it, a lot of employers give insurance benefits to their employees at no cost. And just think about it. Once you get to a certain point in your life, doesn't it make sense to go and change the beneficiary from your spouse or one of your children or multiple children to your favorite charitable organization? And that's something that you could recommend to those people in the 50 to 70 category of sort of like the model giver. And then a bequest in a life insurance, a bequest in a will, a last will and testament. And let me tell you, working in this nonprofit organization at Calvary University, I've become vitally aware of how bequests, state giving, has helped us out when we've had some major expenses come along. And we think, how are we going to replace air conditioning or heating? And then all of a sudden, a bequest, gives us hundreds of thousands of dollars. And now we know how God's going to supply for that need. So there's a lot of alternative prospect considerations. Like I said, some items like the jewelry I don't even have listed on here. Nonetheless, it's still an important consideration. So some thoughts for you as managers. It's important for you to stress the individual donors, identify the large donors, figure out the donor's point of view, construct an information file, and that's actually part of your assignment for this particular week. Consider the tactics that we've been talking about and prepare for closing, and then alternatives. If they're not willing to give the cash, maybe there's a building that would suffice instead of having a building program. All of these things are some thoughts that managers need to take into consideration. So in our next lecture next week, we're going to talk about special events. So stay tuned for that. I hope that you have a good and godly week. And I'm glad to finally be able to end a broadcast with you successfully. Let me pray. Father, thank you for nonprofit organizations. Please, Lord, help us to represent you well in our nonprofit organizations. Please, Lord, let your will be done. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thanks.